Goochland, Powhatan. This is amazing. You know, I just thought it was going to be a couple of us sitting around the table. Ann and I walk in and it's like, man, why did they schedule another event when we were going to be here? Wait, this is all for Democrats? This is unbelievable. Ann and I are so thrilled to be with you. This is day 4 of our kickoff week. Between Monday at 7:30 in the morning, a couple days ago, and next Monday when we finish up on the Eastern Shore, we'll do more than 30 events all over the state. And can I tell you, we are seeing energy like this virtually everywhere we go. I feel that blue wave here in Goochland and Powhatan. I think we're gonna take back the United States House with some great House candidates here. We are 1 seat shy of tying up the Senate, 2 seats shy of Democrats taking back the Senate, and the way things are going, I think we got a great chance of taking back the Senate too. And we have a chance to do it with Virginia playing a leadership role. Let me do some thank yous of some of the people who have spoken, but a thank you to all of you. I want to thank Gene Rossi. Gene ran a great campaign for Lieutenant Governor. Gene has been a fantastic public servant as a prosecutor. His description of that event at his brother's house, I remember it, one of these just beautiful, crisp, clear New England October day. The leaves were beautiful. The event, Gene, your brother, had kids that were down visiting for the event. We stood in the kitchen and visited with them. It was just magnificent. And Gene has been overly kind in describing me, but don't worry, my wife's already starting to puncture my bubble, even as he was complimenting me. So, Gene, I really appreciate your kindness, and we'll do a lot. You've got a lot of great public service in you. I know you and your wife, it'll be fun to do more with you. Thank you, Gene Rossi. To our Democratic dynamic duo chairs, Catherine and Tina, this is an amazing event, and I'm thanking you, but I'm thanking your entire executive board and everybody who works with you. These things don't happen by magic. They don't happen just add water. You have to do a lot of work to pull people together. And the fact that so many of you would come out on a Thursday morning to kick this campaign off with us is just remarkable. So to the county party leadership in both counties, I really, really appreciate your help. Thank you. I am excited. I'm not sure you should be, but I'm excited to be playing with the band here later. And I want to thank Mr. Sneed and the Powhatan Jazz Ensemble. They've asked me to come in and play with them in a little bit. My wife and I love music. Already in the opening days of the campaign, I jammed with the Bluegrass Band Monday night at Maggie Walker High School. Played music at both a fundraiser and a rally in Roanoke last night, and when I played last night, I said, I'm only playing if my wife will dance. Because my wife is a really good flat-footer, bluegrass-style dancer, and I said, I'm only going to play if my wife will dance. And we ended up today in Roanoke, where Ann's from, having a great time. I'm not sure I can hang with these high school kids, though, but I'll back up from the mic if it's going rough. So, but really nice to meet you. And one other thank you I just want to acknowledge. I have a cabinet member from when I was governor. Danny LeBlanc and his wife Mary are sitting right here. Danny is a wonderful guy. Danny was the president of the AFL-CIO in Virginia, and I picked him to be in my cabinet. He was the first member of labor ever to be in a cabinet of a governor. And no matter when we have the 50th person of labor in the cabinet of the governor, Danny will still be the best person ever in the cabinet of the governor. A wonderful, wonderful friend. Thanks, Danny and Mary, for coming. So, one funny story. We're going to see if I think this mic's working okay, right? Does this one better or worse? A little bit better? Okay, better in this room. Great. One funny story just from the campaign trail. You do kickoff events, and it's kind of comical. We did an amazing event in Blacksburg yesterday, a town hall on gun violence at a movie theater, I think it's the Lyric Theater right in Blacksburg, and we had 400 people in the audience. And it was very moving. Chris Hurst, a wonderful member of the House of Delegates from Blacksburg, whose fiance Allison Parker was a newscaster who was killed right on air a couple of years ago. That inspired him to run. He's doing a wonderful job. Uma Loganathan, who was a student whose dad was a professor, killed at Virginia Tech in April 2007. A couple of other really talented researchers and students. We had this very, very important roundtable on gun violence. As we pulled up to the theater, now it's at a movie theater that's showing movies, and so they had to kind of wedge me into the marquee. And the marquee, there's some movie out that I didn't know was out, but the marquee said, Annihilation, Senator Tim Kaine, Wednesday at 3 p.m. So when you said I would crush my opponent, Gene, when you said I would crush my opponent, well listen, I really am heartened to be here. We're going around the state, we're basically talking about a couple of things. We're talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. I ran an ad in 2012 when I ran for governor. When I ran for the Senate, I ran an ad that had me in a classroom with youngsters saying the Pledge of Allegiance and stopping and focusing on the word indivisible. This was in 2012. I didn't see a nation living up to what we teach our children to say and believe every day. And as I'm going around, I'm talking about indivisibility now at a time when groups have popped up claiming that label. Thank God, because we need people when we have a president who likes to divide at every opportunity. We need people who are claiming and holding on to that Pledge of Allegiance value. But 6 years later, I'm focused even more on the last two words of the Pledge of Allegiance, for all. I want a Virginia that works for all. And in my stump speech, and I'm not going to give the long stump speech here because I still want to visit around, but I basically talk about strategies. We need a Virginia with jobs for all, education for all, health care for all, security for all, and equality for all. And I've got points and ideas about all of those things. And I'm spending my time talking about what I hope to do as a senator. I talk about the president a little bit, but I'll just tell you my thought about this. There's a little bit of a trap for Democrats right now. And that trap is we can spend all of our time enumerating the many things that worry us about this administration. His penchant to divide and his tendency to always undercut diplomacy are the two things that worry me the most. There are other things that worry all of us. But if we spend all of our time talking about what's wrong with the other guy or the other side, and not enough time advocating, hey, here's who we are, then we won't take advantage of the grassroots energy. We won't inspire the people that we need to inspire.
Amen.
I am drawing inspiration right now, especially from our young people. Aren't you drawing inspiration from our kids? How many of you marched on March 24 with youngsters somewhere in Virginia? So a number of us. There were more than 20 marches in Virginia, and thousands of Virginians were at the march in D.C. These marches that our young people organized when the Parkland students decided that they just had had enough, and that leaders weren't being leaders and adults weren't keeping them safe, and they walked out. It was amazing what happened all across the country. You know, all across the country, children responded to them. And just like Barbara Johns walked out of Moton High School in 1951 and organized her classmates to walk out as 16-year-olds and say segregated schooling is wrong. Or just as the high schoolers of Birmingham, Alabama in May of 1963 came to Dr. King and said, hey, look, you're trying to desegregate Birmingham. Adults are getting arrested, but we want to march too. And it was the high schoolers marching and getting arrested that ultimately started to change adults in this country, the power structure, to realize we had to do better. And just like it was young people who advocated against the war, so often what is written in Scripture turns out to be true. A little child shall lead them. So often it is children who look adults in the face and say, why don't you be adults? Why don't you be leaders? You say we matter. Show us we matter. And that's what these young people are doing. When I saw that 11-year-old fifth grader, Naomi Wadler from Alexandria, who would let a walkout of her elementary school stand up before 800,000 people as an 11-year-old, looked the power structure of the United States in the face and said, "Don't we matter to you? Don't we matter to you?" was basically what she was saying. That gives me tremendous inspiration. Last, I just want to talk about you, because you probably now take for granted what you've done, but I want you to step back and absorb the gravity of the good that you have done. When I got into politics in 1994 in Virginia, city council race, or when I ran for statewide office in 2001, lieutenant governor's race, Virginia was among the reddest of the red states. Just 24 years ago, just 15 years ago, we were red presidentially essentially since 1948. One quirky counterexample with LBJ and Goldwater, but we were basically red presidentially. When I ran for statewide office, every statewide official was a Republican. We had been through a wilderness decade where Democrats couldn't get elected hardly to anything in Virginia. That was just in 2001. Today, every statewide office holder is a Democrat. We've gone blue the last 3 presidential elections. We have won 10 statewide races in a row. We've won 4 of the last 5 governorships. There is no better turnaround story in American politics in the last 30 years than Virginia. And you've done that. That's been all of you. I have colleagues in the Senate all the time, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona. How did you guys do it? How did you do it? I think, many of you kind of take it for granted. You've just been in the vineyard every day doing your work, and we've been getting better and better and better. People have been moving here. That's been helping us. The Republicans have been making mistakes. That's been helping us. But as we've been getting better and better and better, you might not fully grasp what an amazing turnaround project you have been part of. And it's been so fun for Ann and me both. Ann's family experienced politics at a tough time. When her dad was deciding, as the first elected Republican, to integrate the public schools of Virginia, he basically immediately earned both parties' hatred. He built the modern Republican Party in Virginia when he tried to run in a primary 4 years after he was done for governor, to run in a Republican primary, having built the party. He finished 3rd in a 4-way convention on the Republican side. And the Democrats wouldn't have liked him much either back then. But now he's 94 and people are saying, "Man, that guy was a great governor." He lived long enough for everybody to come around to his point of view. But she was, as a kid, not too different in age than, Naomi, 12-year-old, integrating Virginia public schools. She, as a kid, was exercising leadership. But this state's come a long way. Now, we know this. There's nothing we're doing we can't do a lot better. Oh my gosh, whether it's criminal justice reform, opioid addiction, drug overdoses. As a society, last year, 65,000 people in this country died of drug overdoses. During the entire Vietnam War, 58,000 died. We basically are losing a war that is bigger than the Vietnam War right in our neighborhoods and homes every year in this country. And so we have so much more to do. But I like you, I am confident that the things that have to be done will be done the right way if Democrats are in leadership of our Commonwealth and of our country. And that's why I'm so proud to be running for the Senate. I'm so excited to be out here with you today. So let's go win 2018. I know we can do it. I know we can do it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is great.
We're going to take questions from the audience. Do we have to pass out the mics, or Tina? Okay, we're going to take questions for how long, Tina? Okay.
10 minutes of questions. I will not filibuster on the answers, and I will go room to room. Let me start actually on my band side. So, is there a question over on this side?
Would you stand up, please? And would you call us your name?
Teresa Hudson.
Hey, Teresa.
Hi. My father was chairman of the Democratic Party here in Powhatan for a long time back when Governor Holton was in office, so we hear you. what you said. We understand, and we appreciate everything you guys have done. My question is about the DoddFrank.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, I'm just not really sure where you stand on its, like, they're trying to basically eviscerate it, it seems. And I'd just like to hear your opinion. And
Sure.
Yeah, your point
Now,
of view.
does everybody here on this side? Okay, so the question was about Dodd-Frank, where I stand on Dodd-Frank, but Teresa's question was probably really inspired by a banking reform bill that we just passed in the Senate that's pending over in the House right now. So I'll talk about both. I am a very strong supporter of Dodd-Frank. Absolutely necessary after the fiscal collapse. I was not in the Senate when it passed, but I was the DNC chair going around the country giving speeches about the need for Dodd-Frank. Virginia's Senator Mark Warner was one of the drafters of Dodd. We are both strongly for Dodd-Frank. We just passed the Senate banking reform bill. Here's what Barney Frank says about the bill we just passed. He says the bill maintained and even created more of a firm foundation for 90% of Dodd-Frank, but adjusted 10% of it. And the debate is about the adjustment. Was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? First, I was really glad we were able to more firmly establish Dodd-Frank, because you're right, Republicans want to repeal it, and there's some chance that on the House, they may take our bill and try to turn it into a repeal, which will sink the whole thing and won't go anywhere. In our bill, we more firmly established that. We maintained the separate financing of the agency so that Congress couldn't strangle its appropriation. We maintained its independence, but we did make some adjustments. Basically, if our bill passes in the form we sent it to the House, there will be adjustment of regulations of some banks based on their size and risk. But every bank in this country will end up being significantly more regulated by more regulators than before Dodd-Frank. This does adjust some regulations backward based on 8 years of experience under Dodd-Frank, but it is still significantly more regulation by more regulators than before Dodd-Frank. Why vote to adjust the regulations? During the financial collapse in Virginia, we lost one bank. Since Dodd-Frank has passed, we've lost 35% of our banks in Virginia. Why have we lost so many banks after Dodd-Frank? We lost it because when you write the regulations to go after the bad guys, you don't just go after the bad guys. You write regulations that all banks have to follow. And what has happened is those regulations have made many small community banks decide we can't meet the regulatory burden of the new law, and so they sell out to a larger bank. So the 35% banks that we've lost have been small banks that are selling up to the larger guys, and ironically, a law that was designed to stop too big to fail is sort of accelerating too big to fail. So this particular law, the bill, because it's not yet a law, had the support of the credit unions, had the support of the community bankers, and had the support of the National Banking Association, which is the organization of women and minority-owned banks. I don't think it's perfect. Like any law that's a compromise, I could have made an adjustment slightly here or slightly there. But I think it will help us maintain the viability of a small community banking sector, because if we get to the point where it's only just big banks, an awful lot of communities like Powhatan are not going to have access to capital for an ag loan, a home loan, a business loan. So that is why Mark and I were supporters of the banking reform bill. Thank you, Teresa. How about on this side? So, Ken, it's over.
My name's Cindy Booton.
Ask me and I'll repeat.
I would like to have you speak towards what can Congress do to curb the likelihood of a trade war instigated by certain persons.
Yeah.
Reading, because we're not speaking.
Yeah. And is it Cindy? Cindy?
Cindy Booton.
So Cindy's question was, what can Congress do to try to deal with a president who seems pretty intent on launching a growing trade war? So I'll tell you what I think we ought to do. The Constitution, I'm a stickler about, I want the President to exercise the powers he has, but I want Congress to exercise our powers. And under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, powers about trade are for Congress, not for the executive. Just like the power to declare war. I don't want a president starting a war unilaterally without the vote of Congress. I said the same thing to President Obama as I'm saying to President Trump. I don't think a president should start a war or a trade war without a vote of Congress. But over time, Congress has let the president, in my view, have too much power on this. So here's what I'm working on with colleagues in both parties right now. Here's how a president can do a trade deal under current law. A president can negotiate a deal, but then the president has to submit it to Congress for a vote. And you get a vote quickly, and it's an up or down vote. You can't lock it up in committee. So the president gets an expedited procedure, but the trade deal doesn't happen unless Congress votes on it. I think the president should be able to do tariffs on his own without Congress. And I would basically suggest, and I'm working with colleagues to try to do this, if the president thinks we need tariffs, let him come up with a proposal. Let that proposal come to Congress. He can get an expedited vote on it. If it's urgent, we can do it quickly. Privileged position on the floor of both houses. But I don't think the president should be able to start a trade war without Congress. So I am working with colleagues to try to have Congress do what Congress is supposed to do and not hand that power away. How about one more in each room? That's fair. I'm going to go one more in the center. And I'll repeat the question, Bob's question for everybody.
I'm curious what your thoughts are of hardening our schools right away. Similar to the airport, at the governor's mansion, and White House. And the second part of that is, would you embrace the NRA as experts in firearms or help to satisfy the problem?
So Bob's question was about school safety. A, should we harden schools, more security in schools? And second, would there be areas of dialogue with the NRA about security in schools? And the answer is absolutely. And I want to now get into what we need to do, what I'm for and what I'm not. We need more funding for school security. Right before the Parkland shooting, President Trump sent a proposed budget to Congress that dramatically cut school security money. Now, after the shooting at Parkland, the White House and Congress, Democrats and Republicans, we all agreed we need to put more money in. And we just passed a budget 2 weeks ago today that dramatically increased money for school security. So that's an important thing. How should it be done? I don't think Washington has a one-size-fits-all solution where we say, this is right for the Powhatan school system and this is right for the school system in Seattle. I think we should give the school security money to schools. I think school boards and principals can figure out what is the right way to do security. But I have a strong feeling about this. I think the idea of arming teachers is a big, big mistake. I think it's a big, big mistake. Correct me, honey, I'm going to tell a story on you, but correct me if I'm wrong. My wife was a juvenile court judge. In the juvenile courtroom, very emotional. You might be ruling to take somebody's parental rights away. You might be sending somebody to jail or prison. She had a trained law enforcement official with her in the courtroom, but wouldn't they lock their weapons away and not... The trained law enforcement official that was in the courtroom would lock the weapon in a gun safe and not carry it into the courtroom, because the idea would be it's so emotional in there, somebody or a bunch of people could try to grab the weapon away from this trained security person and then kill a bunch of folks. Well, if that's what a trained security person would do, why would we expect that a kindergarten teacher could be able to use a weapon in a well-regulated and smart way against a bad guy? So the idea of security to schools, I think, is smart. And dialoguing with anybody, if the school board, for example, is going to tackle what's the right way to do security, then anybody with expertise, whether it's local NRA chapter, local Virginia Guard, local law enforcement, certainly offering ideas about what's the best way to do school security, I think that's really important. Funding for resources, yes. Arming teachers, bad idea, in my view. Last question right here.
This Lakshmi Talk.
Yeah.
And this last week has been
I'm an immigration attorney, as you know, so this last week has been really troubling. There are 3 things that have happened. Number one, the discretion that was allowed when pregnant women to keep them from being detained.
Yep.
And what that does is that forces them to then agree to be removed from the United States because, you know, they don't want to be detained during their pregnancy. Number 2, the armed guards that are now the National Guard that's now going to our borders when we have a net zero immigration issue. And number 3, immigration is a civil procedure, so you don't have the right to counsel at an immigration court. So this week, what they have said is they're going to evaluate judges' performance based on how quickly they dispense cases, and effectively incentivizing them to increase their deportation. And so, you know, it seems to me that you know, justice is blind, but for all of this, she may be deaf as well. And it's just that undertone of constantly trying to undermine whether it's DACA or everything else. What is it that, if anything, can the Senate do when the president is trying to...
I will thank Lakshmi for the question. To repeat it, in both rooms, it's a question about immigration. You know, I said the 2 things that worry me most about the president are a tendency to undercut diplomacy and a tendency to divide. And, you know, one of the chief evidence around the tendency to divide, the way he talks about immigrants. I'm so glad that a country was willing to let penniless Irish Americans, penniless Irish great-grandparents come here in the 1840s, or Italian. I mean, immigration is like the transfusion in our bloodstream that keeps us young, flexible, creative, and innovative. So many societies grow and then they collapse because they get corroded arteries and they don't want to change. But immigration has been one of the things that has enabled us to kind of always be vibrant and new. And of course you have to have laws and rules, and we should follow them. I was part of a debate in the Senate. We passed a comprehensive immigration bill in June of 2013. 5 years later, the House still hasn't been willing to do anything about it. That's why we got to get some of these guys elected to the House this year. So what can we do? Well, I'll just talk about 2 things because there's so many pieces of this, Lakshmi. You know, as an immigration attorney, this is a complex area. Immigration is like the Internal Revenue Code. It is extremely complicated, but beginning with an appreciation for the value of immigration, and then having rules that, you know, kind of flow from that rather than starting with the position that immigration is bad. I'm going to give you a statistic. I'm 60 years old. When I was born, 1 out of every 100 Virginians was not born here, was an immigrant, and we were 38th in the nation in per capita income. We were poor. Today, 1 out of every 9 Virginians is an immigrant born in another country, and we're 12th in the nation in per capita income. The period of Virginia becoming more open to people from other countries has precisely coincided with Virginia's improving economic fortunes. Why is that the case? We live in a global economy now. Having global connections is good, and it's not just a port and an airport. People who are from somewhere else, who have contacts somewhere else, can help businesses find customers somewhere else, and that's why immigration has turned out to be a real benefit to us. So 2 issues right now. President sending the Guard to the border. The president sort of acts like the military is his own palace guard, right? Do a parade. I'm mad this morning. Let's send him to the border. Now look, when I was governor, we dispatched Virginia Guard to the border back during the 2006-2010. We did some deployments to the border. If it's part of a strategy, if you talk about why it's needed and it makes sense, of course. But as Lakshmi pointed out, there was a big net flow of immigration, including illegal immigration back then. Now it's like to net zero. So what exactly is the strategy? Is it anything other than a president just wanting to appease his own ego? He got mad because he couldn't cut a deal to build a big wall, so now he's going to order Virginians to leave their jobs? Deploying the Guard is not just like, oh, snap, you can deploy the Guard. People who are part of the Virginia Guard or all the state guards, they're living at home with their families, they're working their jobs, and it is an inconvenience to deploy. you're doing it for the good of the country, but it's an inconvenience. It shouldn't just happen because of a whim. And so I'm on the Armed Services Committee. Like, you can be darn sure when we go back, and we're having Armed Services meetings next week, we're going to bring in the Secretary of Defense and the White House folks and say, okay, you're proposing to mobilize the Guard for this. Exactly what is the plan? Exactly what is the need? Why do you need to do this? Is this just policy by tweet, or is it policy that has some sense? So we're going to really dig into that.